And Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga has pulled out of October's presidential election rerun. His rival, President Uhuru Kenyatta, won the election back in August, but the result was annulled by the Supreme Court after evidence of irregularities. Odinga says the Electoral Commission hasn't introduced the reforms needed for a credible election. Let's get more on that story from Patrick Gathara. He's a strategic communications consultant, writer and award-winning political cartoonist in Kenya. Good to have you with us, Patrick. So what are we to make of this? Odinga is saying that there haven't been enough reforms, and if the election goes ahead, then it would simply not be credible.
Right, yes, thanks for having me. It's true, Mr. Odinga has been saying for a long time that there needs to be reform of the electoral system before he could participate in the election, before he could have an election that would be deemed free and fair. But this has come as a surprise to most Kenyans, this move to sort of withdraw from the election. But there is some method to the madness, because in 2013 we had another election petition in which the Supreme Court actually ruled on what a fresh election would be, or what the Constitution means by that. And it essentially says that if he withdraws now, that we've got to go into a whole new set of nominations, and the election has to be held afresh in 60 days from October 26th.
Well, that's not what Uhuru Kenyatta is saying, though, is it? His position is that it was Odinga's decision to withdraw, and as far as he's concerned, the election is going to go ahead. So if that happens, what do you think we're going to see in Kenya?
Well, I think before this happens, we're probably going to end up in court again to get a clarification from the Supreme Court about what it meant. I think the judgment in 2013 was fairly clear, and I think Odinga is actually on very solid ground when he says that his withdrawal means that we have to have a whole fresh set of nominations, and the electoral process essentially has to restart again. Kenyatta will be arguing that given that Odinga has withdrawn, and he was the only other person who was running against him in the fresh election, that he therefore should be essentially elected unopposed. But that, I think, is going to be something that lawyers are going to be pondering over for the next few days.
I mean, aren't Kenyans sick of all this political uncertainty, all these accusations of irregularities over voting, and whether the Electoral Commission is doing enough to safeguard elections, and now, you know, yet another crisis on the horizon?
Right. I think most Kenyans are tired and exhausted from this sort of protracted electoral season. We'd all thought after August 8th that we would have a decision made and we'd have a new president, or Kenyatta would be re-elected. But as it turned out, that election was annulled, which took us into new territory. And now with Odinga's withdrawal, it just further lengthens this. And it's good to actually note that in the next, I mean, we need to have an election before Kenyatta can be confirmed in his second term. And if the interpretation of 2013 stands, the Supreme Court's interpretation, that election has to be held now, not on October 26th, but 60 days after that, which means by Christmas Day of December, Christmas Day of this year, that's when we need to have an election. So I was just going to pull this out. And we've also got to remember that it's having real effects on the economy, all this political uncertainty. We've seen the government already downgrade the prospects for economic growth for this year. And there's quite a lot of pressure coming on to these two players to get a deal sorted out so that we can get away from this and get a final resolution. One last thing I'll say is I think that this is actually probably a ploy by Raila Odinga, given that there is a move in Parliament where Jubilee has an overwhelming majority to change the election laws. And in essence, he's been seeing that move as one meant to guarantee that Kenyatta would win or would be declared president after the fresh election is held. So I think pretty much this is his ploy his gambit. And I think that at some point in the next few days, you will see lots of bargaining that might still mean that he runs on the 26th.
Patrick, good to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed for that. Patrick Gathara there.